This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech players in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hello to everybody. This is a very special episode of Breaking Banks Europe. And today we're going to speak about the topic of refugees and displaced people, actually in collaboration with the Point Zero Forum, which is taking place from the 1st to the 3rd of July. 130 million refugees worldwide in 2024. How can blockchain and maybe fintech help ease that situation a little bit? I'm going to speak about that topic with Carmen Het and Frederik Gregaard. Hello, everybody. How are you today?
Hello. Yes, we are very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And why don't you start to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience so that everybody knows whom we have on the show today?
Yes, I'm Carmen Het, so I'm UNHCR's corporate treasurer, and I obviously deal with, putting the implementation to work in the various countries, in the 130 countries we are in, and the various degrees of emergencies that we have and conflicts. UNHCR leads the international action to protect people forced to flee conflict and persecution, and also those that are denied a nationality. So we have a lot of people that we care for. And we have ever increasing, so I have to say that as well, we have ever increasing people that are forcibly displaced. And for those, we are looking for solutions and obviously meeting the most immediate needs that they have. These are the most vulnerable. We have to keep that in mind, but solutions, looking at long-lasting solutions as well. So in the first instance, how we provide aid assistance to them, and then also with a view that we have solutions in place that really allow them to enhance their self-reliance. So we also need to keep in mind that people, the host countries where people flee to, so people, refugees, flee to other countries, and this is an amazing burden and a huge burden to any host country. So we also want to lessen that burden and basically expand the solutions that we can provide to them.
Wonderful. Wonderful comment. Thank you so much, Frederik. Why are you on the show? Who are you?
Yes, my name is Frederik Gregaard. I'm the CEO of the Cardano Foundation. Cardano, the public blockchain, is probably the largest distributed decentralized network when you look at the compute power and the network. We have 4 to 5 million people interacting with it every single day. And I think one of the dreams of blockchain and what really appealed to me as well was this idea that a blockchain can give economic opportunity to the people who don't have it, give identity to the people who don't have it, and basically hold up against the scrutiny of asymmetric governance relationship. And for those of you who are not so much into asymmetric governance relationship, that could be, for instance, if a nation state or a very powerful company, if they have the right to change what we think or what you think is reality around yourself, that creates an asymmetric relationship. And identity is actually one of those things which is sort of granted by a nation state. But when you are forcefully, have to move, this is one of the first things who falls away, is the insecurity about, your identity. Can you even prove it? Do you have the documents? Will the government you're fleeing from verify and validate who you are, what you've done in your past? And by that also giving you the opportunities in the host country where you're getting to, that you can actually not just be a burden to them, as Carmen was talking about, but you can actually add value. So that's some of the areas where we can think about that blockchains can help. So it's really about identity verifications, access to services, data privacy and security, empowerment and autonomy, interoperability, very important, fraud reduction, trust and transparency.
That's a lot, Frederik, and thank you so much for this introduction, because there are a lot of buzzwords already we need to double click on and talk about in a minute or so. But first of all, Carmen, may I ask you that out of the UNHCR's perspective, could you give us a little bit of a background to the current developments? So, what are out of your perspective? What are the numbers we are speaking about? So. In what magnitude are you thinking? And then as a second part of the question, how would you see the future development?
Yeah. So as we said, we touched upon, so we have ever increasing people in need. So UNHCR would like to provide aid assistance in cash. So we call these cash-based interventions, and to be able to reach the people for their own needs with dignity, and obviously they make their own choices what they need. So the idea is really to have an open system to make sure that we can reach them in the financial ecosystems, but also in that they can reach markets as well. So it's not just about cash. So cash-based interventions is obviously about delivering cash in digital format, but also to make sure that they can utilize the aid assistance that is provided to them, and the utility, so the usability needs to be contextually right wherever they are. So that might not be the same across the board. And like we heard, identity verification, digital ID, and digital wallets going forward in the future is obviously key, and the different credentials that you can have on the wallet. So you can have personal identification credentials, you can have financial credential, which basically would give you like a credit track record and things like that. So it will be portable, so that as well. So if you're in one country, you go to another country, so you don't have to start from the beginning. It could have educational credentials, employment and work credentials, health credentials. So I think what we are looking for is really to provide services that are obviously useful to them to go about their lives. So I was saying about the self-reliance, the livelihoods that any of us actually, if we would be in that situation, we want to go about our lives, we want to take decisions, and obviously have a chance to be there relevant in that particular situation. So this is really our use case. So I will come to it, that we have used blockchain for disbursement and using digital wallets. So, but there's much more to do, which is to expand the credentials in that particular wallet.
Again, Carmen, what are the numbers? How many refugees do you expect for 2024? Whatever kind of a definition you give me, I would be very happy, because I think it's really so much needed that people understand the magnitude of this issue.
Yeah. So the magnitude of this issue is that currently we have something like 130 million forcibly displaced. We are looking already, the numbers are increasing as we are talking. So we're looking already in the 140, 150 million plus. But you should also know that overall people in need of assistance amount about to 300 million plus. So it's huge. All these numbers are huge. And not to mention, of course, we also have people impacted by climate change. So we're talking about UNHCR, the UN refugee agencies, but then we have other agencies where you had food insecurity, you have many more insecurities and aid that needs to be delivered. So it's people. So if you like, we cannot obviously provide aid to the 140 million. So it would be like running a country.
The numbers sound like France and Germany together, right? So that's about the size of the countries, and put a little bit of Austria on top to this, right? Frederik.
And I think this is really one of the interesting points, right? So I think there's two parts we need to really put focus on when we speak about that. The first is that Carmen and UNHCR, they basically need more funds because the problem is getting bigger and bigger, and they need to place more aid. One of the things we've done from a blockchain perspective is we created a new way to actually raise funds, which is through a so-called staking pool or a mining pool, with UNHCR actually are running a full blockchain implementation. So if you are within the crypto or blockchain space, you can stake ADA directly with refugees, VRFGS, which the pool is called, and you won't lose anything. You will just basically gain the opportunity for UNHCR to get more aid, which can be used to forcefully displace people. So I think this is a really good way. What that also does, which is really interesting when you think about it, it adds something to your personal identity. Because normally when you pay for your aid, you run through a credit card, and who actually pays when you think through the rails is that the credit card company is the end doing a transaction to UNHCR. But if you do it in this way, right, you actually start creating an identity around yourself where you own the proof that you actually have been helping UNHCR. This actually creates a link, right, between the UNHCR and the person who is staking, who's not losing any money, but basically just an opportunity here, right, to give financial aid to the UNHCR. It basically gives them a connectivity on the internet or on the blockchain, to be more specific. The other thing which is really, really interesting about this is that there's a lot of discussion specifically at the 0.0 forum, but also in a lot of the other regulatory scenes where I go around, which is about how do we combat shadow banking and where does fintech play in? And we speak about automating KYC and AML, and we think about AI and large language models, and how do you move clients from one bank to the other? But imagine that you are a refugee, right? And you, as Carmen said, you go to a country and you now get some aid, right? So you get either some money, or you get a prepaid credit card, or you get a crypto wallet, right? Now, many places there will be a very, very tight limit, and these limits get smaller and smaller because of inflation. So these limits were decided many years ago, right? But due to inflation, it actually means that the limits get smaller and smaller. And then it requires you to authenticate yourself. So for instance, I'm sending money directly to Africa, right? And I paid too much money to Africa, and suddenly the payment provider comes to me and says, you cannot send any more. We need to have a full breakdown, full salary slips and everything like that. And that suddenly becomes a big hurdle, which you won't do. Plus, for the person who has the aid, it restricts them from actually using it, right? So I think what you really have to think about is that sometimes bearer assets is not about money laundering, is not about bad things. And when you start from the bottom, you actually don't get the villain. This is not where terrorist financing is happening. Terrorist financing is happening on the other side of the leg, right? So what you need to think about here is that sometimes bearer assets is actually what you need, because displaced people need to be able to get back to their livelihood. And if they don't have a governmental issued ID because they are fleeing for the ones who actually issued that, is actually also at risk for them when they identify themselves, if they even have the means. So I think there's a great opportunity for the fintech landscape to actually step in here and work together with also some of the regulators around, how we actually put our technology at use to ensure that agencies such as the UNHCR has the ability to give aid, who also is accepted across multiple types of wallets and means.
Yeah, let me, this is a lot, Frederik. What you just shared with us this is massive information. Let us try a little bit to peel the onion and to kind of get to it in smaller bites so that we somehow digest it easier. So on the one side, we have blockchain as an enabler for identity, right? That's what you said. Or maybe it could be used also for identity. We need to have blockchain for value transfer. Carmen, you explained me the other day the wonderful example or showcase actually that you've been doing with the Ukraine. Can you share that a little bit?
Yes. So like Fred explained to us, so we have, on one side, we want to collect money, and there's a whole community out there that obviously would like to be involved and obviously make sure that the money, actually all of us, so whether you are a donor, classic donor, government, or if you're a private sector donor, individual giving and so forth, you want to have that traceability, that accountability, that the money actually does go where it's meant to go. So the rails already start in actually getting the money in. That's one thing. And then actually on the payment side, so we have a use case, and we have developed or further expanded, scaled it up as well. So in other jurisdictions as well. But what we basically do, so what we are saying is know your refugee actually. So know your refugee, know your customer. Yes, UNHCR has systems in place already that obviously have many data points on people we care for. So we provide protection. So this is our mandate, our prime mandate. So we need to make sure that that data is obviously protected at all times from anyone, actually. So the key is actually to have that data that is protected to such an extent. How we make it available that it actually can be portable and it can be useful. So that's one thing. But I come to the payment. So the payment on the blockchain, to use blockchain, that means that we have our internal systems, processes where we run our payment files, if you like. And then we access the blockchain, and the blockchain basically then pulls, like a stable coin, for example, and in this case, USDC from Circle, onto a wallet powered by Stellar blockchain. And the key is then that the people in need authenticate themselves with a message. So we send a message, an SMS message, and then that link comes up, and that is the wallet that we want them to use. It's a non-custodial wallet, and they have then cash out options. So if we do this right, we have these contextual cash out options that are relevant to each and every country. So in the Ukraine, we piloted this now some 2 years ago already, and we are actually in full scale up to provide cash in a digital way. But we also have a bridge, so we still need to look contextually in each and every country whether you can use digital or you need a bridge, which actually is then the cash out in fiat. So we do this as well.
Exactly.
So we need to see, also with the regulation, like Fred already told us a little bit, it has something to do with regulation. We need to see what we can do in each and every jurisdiction, but also to store the value on the wallet. So we have a use case scaling up in Argentina, whereby we have on a wallet, we provide the USDC, so the US dollar, in digital format, and that allows them then to store the value. And basically we are saving there something like 30% on the devaluation of their own currency. So that means that we have ways of protecting the devaluation of the local currency. So we go really into sort of technical aspects, how you safeguard the value, the initial donation that actually has been provided as well. So it's not just a payment; it's about a payment that actually can safeguard the value of the donation. So that's obviously paramount. So we want to uphold the purchasing power, and that it can be used in that particular jurisdiction where they are. But even more so, like I said before, to also have a view with going cross-border and having the same access on the cross-border side of things. So this is quite, I think, exciting to us, because we know the blockchain, can deliver with speed, with low cost, with security, and being able to scale up to the millions of transactions. And the cost on each transaction, it's something like 0.0000 something penny on the actual transaction, but we still have actual money flows that we should not forget. So it's a monetary transfer of value that needs to be orchestrated in the right way. So a lot of things in the blockchain. So the blockchain is like an operating system, if you like, in the background for payments. But then we still have actual money flows and the value of money to deal with, when it gets receipted by the people we care for.
Let me double click a little bit on this "know your refugee," which I actually like as a phrase. And being a former banker, I remember the days when I think it was the Syria crisis in 2015. When that all started, that we in the bank, we tried to onboard refugees for the bank account. And actually it was the regulator who said, if you cannot do a full KYC, you cannot do this, right? So there might have even been the political will to do so, but then the regulator more or less said, this is a no-go, we cannot do this. How could you overcome this with your Know Your Refugee? Is there any kind of an identity you would provide me as a bank, for instance? Could I come up to you and say, listen, the guy has no passport, which is for obvious reasons, it's not that this would be a normal. Some politicians make us think that they only come for whatever vacation, which is definitely not the case because they have life-threatening circumstances there. So yes, you might have lost your passport. So how could you overcome this?
Yeah. So the key is that UNHCR obviously relies also on the KYC of the financial system. So it might be currently we UNHCR is something like between 12 and 20 data points on all people that are displaced, for the fact that we provide protection and refugee IDs to them if they don't have any national passports and so forth. Mm-hmm. So the key is that I think it's a discussion that needs to happen, and we had some of these discussions also with the Financial Action Task Force that has recommendations for anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing and so forth, KYC. So the key is where we get comfort levels for the aid assistance that obviously represents, on average, a payment like $500 or $200 or up to $1,000, depending, how it works on the family composition. But I think that the refugee agency, we do actually have that data. We need to protect that data, so we can have that data, if you like, in our own environment, and then we need to see how we actually certain data, like in the case of the Ukraine case, where we have date of birth and the phone number. So we work with the phone number, date of birth, month, year, and the amount is then on that basis. The amount is actually pulled, through an API payout, and so the key is, I think that we need to have, systems that provide trust. And I think that's what blockchain can do, to give additional trust that we have systems, internal systems, which are obviously much more comprehensive and have much more data points. And then as we go into the blockchain and the validation on the blockchain, on the transactions, if we can talk like that, on that value transfer, then we need data points. Not all of them, of course, but just a few that actually allow us to trace this and have unique identifiers. So at all times, we actually know, that transaction is whose transaction. So we do get that transparency, we get that accountability to the donor, transaction by transaction. So I would say that it's the trust that the systems can enforce, the blockchain systems, and also then together with our own system, and our own systems also need to be reflecting certain upgrades, what we can do, and how this interoperability from our systems into the blockchain and to the on-ramps and the off-ramps, so the whole orchestration of the integration of all these systems, the touch points, they obviously need to be, they need to be bulletproof in that sense, if I can talk like that.
Frederik.
I think here, yes, this is super interesting. I think people should really pay attention to what Carmen is saying, because Carmen is not only saying it, she's been living it. She's, she's sort of the bridge between the normal financial market at large scale, but also the people who needs this. Yes. I think what he's really saying here is, one thing is, the blockchains are ready, but the other thing which is very interesting is what's coming out right now across multiple blockchains and is being more accepted within politicians and is being now also vetted between different key regulators is something called CK snarks or zero knowledge proof or roll-ups. It has a lot of names. So we, for instance, have implemented something with a local law enforcement agency who has sort of similar concerns around some of these things. And this can actually allow UNHCR to be, for instance, a validator of identity without actually sharing the identity points. And what that means is that the local regulator of the bank or of the payment agent or whoever is going to sort of receive the USDC or receive the check or receive the pre-printed credit card, whatever that might be, the refugee gets from UNHCR, there will be a counter question with know your refugee, or you get over a certain border, and you need to get something so you can pay with it to get, bread on the table or get an education or so on. And here, I think what's very powerful is that UNHCR is so good at collecting data points, and they're very protective around it. So we shouldn't be thinking so much about cannibalism or thinking about we have in banking to own those, because otherwise the FATF will come after us. We can actually use modern technology like one-way hash algorithms, or even all the way to CK snarks, which, by the way, BlackRock is using every single day, right? And Apple is using that technology as well, right? We are able to leverage on that, but that requires that we update the regulator and we upgrade the policy network. And therefore, I think the 0.0 Forum is so important, because this is one of those areas where global regulators come together, and we have the opportunity from the industry and from senior professionals as Carmen to talk to them about what's actually needed on the tail end, because this is a tail end risk. This is not the major risk. The major risk is not a refugee who gets $1,000 to do something over a blockchain. This is a tail end risk, right? The real risk is the millions and billions of dollars who's being laundered every single day through shadow companies and, islanding corporations, and through, local countries who does not have the general FATF under control, right? And then suddenly the UNHCR and other NGOs are being hindered by this. So this is one of the reasons why we support the 0.0 Forum, and why we are so keen on working with the UNHCR around these topics, around bearer assets and crypto, but also around raising money to a global population who's just increasing for the need of this.
Yeah. I'm very happy you do the advertising. No, seriously, but you're absolutely right, because as much as I see it, we would have the technical solutions in place. What is kind of making it what is making the difference then is the political will to use those tools, right? And I think this is something we will not speak about today, but nevertheless, we have had a European election most recently. When recording the section, actually, that was yesterday. So we will see how much political will to deal with refugee issues and topics actually will remain in Europe, for instance. And let's happily leave it open.
I think you have to think about it differently, right? So where time is running out for us in terms of helping refugees, because it's just exponentially increasing.
Yes.
Where time is going for us is that for every political change there is in every country, there is a new generation who starts to be there. And the newer generation has been much more exposed to technology than the old generation. So where the old generation has been maybe, struggling with the general concept of the internet and platform economy and Web 2, the newer generation, whoever that might be, and maybe that's not the case in Europe right now, but if you look at the world population as I do, right, we do see that people get more and more upskilled around digital, right? And digital becomes much more native. So I think that it won't balance itself out, and we really truly need to make a really big cry out to help people like Carmen who fight the trenches every single day. But I think there is some positive notes out there that for every political change we have, people are getting slightly younger. Well, most countries, right? But people are getting slightly younger and more exposed to technology. And the more peril we have, the more disaster we have, the more we go to new solutions, and the willingness of trying out new solutions and understanding those are increasing every single day. And I think that is positive, but we need to encourage that. And we need to encourage that on a policy level, which means that we need translators who understand the current regulatory policy worldwide, including FATF, anti-money laundering, travel rules, and so on. But we also need them to be able to translate what can these new technologies do and what is the need. That triangle between that translation is so important, because you cannot go to a policymaker and say, read the code, otherwise go away. That's not how it works, right? So these translators, like Carmen is one of them. I might one day also be like one of them, right? You are definitely one of those, Matthias, with the work you've been doing in setting up banks and working on the intersection of fintech, right? The more of these translators we have who can interact with policymakers and bring the message of what can be done from a technical perspective. What is the current regulation? Nobody wants to be, have an enforcement action or go to jail or do something was wrong. And what is the actual problem, which Carmen was illustrating and talking about in the start, and that this problem is exponentially increasing is a big problem, right? So this triangle is a very important important one to get the translators right.
I would know a bank who would like to be in competition about it, right? It's more like the situation that we need to warm up at least one or two partners to make it the last mile for any payment, because having a wallet on the one side is good for getting purchasing power delivered to me. By the way, I still need a mobile phone. I need the mobile phone contract to this because, Carmen, you explained me that the people will receive an SMS for activation and so on. So I could see that to be also a part of the challenge there. Because maybe you lost your mobile phone when fleeing the country and so on, Fred?
But think about it like this, Matthias. If every single company who hears this podcast, they have developers, they have engineers, they have people who don't need to be in the office, but who needs to code something or do something in the digital economy. If every single company who hears this podcast would go to UNHCR and hire some of the refugees who are in a camp, what you automatically get out of that is you will need less direct aid because now they have a salary. You will have to force your company around the onboarding of the employee, right? Which means that they might not have a passport, but they have a GitHub repository or other means to showcase that they actually can do what they say they can, right? Plus, you are now exposed from your local bank because you have to pay the salary, right? You have to figure out how you do that to a person who might not have a bank account. So if you as a CEO or decision maker takes the conscious choice of want to help something, I think that one of the exercises you can do who has multiple effects is actually to try and think about, wouldn't there be some IT people or some people who can sit in a refugee camp, which I can hire, and try and go through that and see if you can pull that through. And maybe 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 of those cases will fall because it won't work of whatever reason it is. But if a lot of us as CEOs start doing that, this will start bringing change because you will start seeing this value chain Carmen is speaking about, because we are all sitting in it today. We're all paying salaries. We're all interacting with regulators and supervisory authorities and so on. We're all having employees. We're all thinking about permanent establishment. We're all thinking about how do we run payroll and how do finance do. And if we start going down that route, I tell you, this will bring something very positive for UNHCR's work. Plus, it will give you the knowledge, also your fintech knowledge, kind of think about how we solve this and how we can put some pressure on this.
So, and this is so, which means actually we are reaching out to the blockchain industry or to the blockchain community. Let me say it like this, right? First of all, wallets is one of the topics we spoke about. Of course. Then it's not only it's fintech, maybe banks, maybe not only fintech, but in general banks actually on ground on the host countries, right? I would say this is also some ecosystem group we need to reach out. We also can speak about insurances, for instance, because that has been left aside totally now, and then out of all those components, actually we could make it a holistic support offer. Of course, then, I do not want to pour water into the wine, but then it also comes to local kind of laws and regulation regarding labor market. At least if I know my German laws a little bit about it, like refugees or asylum takers are not allowed to work, at least for the first, 2-4 years or so.
But some of them might not have entered Germany yet, right? They are in a refugee camp. And if you think about a medium-sized German production company, if they want to hire, let's say, 20 Java developers to do an overhaul of an internal website, they can go and talk to the UNHCR. They can have a look at the GitHub repositories and the CVs, right? They can start saying, I want to hire some of those. And now you have to deal with your finance department, your legal department, your risk department, because you have to figure out how do I hire them, and they haven't entered Germany yet, right? And I think this is the trick here, right? Before they actually get into your country, you have opportunities in this, let's call it Web 2 or the classic. I mean, every company has IT systems and every company is struggling to get developers. And we have so many great developers sitting in a refugee camp, struggling around, they want to do what they've been trained to do. Now, there's also doctors and other people, right? But it's harder as a remote doctor to work. But I think there is some ways where we can start pushing local regulation, local policy by upgrading our knowledge to see why didn't it work? If I really, as a CEO or as a founder, if I really wanted to do that, where is it that it doesn't work? Right. And by getting that knowledge, that's why you can go to Point Zero Forum and start speaking to these policymakers and say, I couldn't get it to work because of this. Can you help me out? And you will have Carmen and me and others there as well, who can then, bridge the gap of knowledge, if any is still there.
So we're running out of time, guys. Actually, that was extremely exciting. So we need to wrap it up. And for our audience out there, I could tell this is only the warm-up for the discussions and conversations and workshops we will have during the Point Zero Forum. We at least will have one panel talking about exactly that topic of refugees and blockchain and fintech. And we will have a workshop also in which we can then chip in and discuss real-life solutions to that maybe support the work of UNHCR on this, and so on and so forth. So I find that to be, I'm really, really happy about it that we have the space for that on the Point Zero Forum. Why? Because I think it's enormously relevant that we speak about it, right? Just by ignoring this problem will not walk away, right? So this is why I think it's always better to tackle it than to ignore it. To conclude our session, is there kind of any final sentence or any kind of final guideline you want to give to our listeners, how they maybe could support us and on this work, and or maybe how they could, to whom maybe they could contact, or how they can approach us actually when they are willing to support UNHCR and others on this work? Is there any guidance you can provide as a precise takeaway for our audience?
Yeah, well, the precise guidance is that where we are. So where we are, we are UNHCR. But I think what we want to do is to be able to reach people anywhere, anytime, on any device. And I think the next step would really be to have a UN-like digital wallet, however we're going to call it,
yes,
where it has all the ingredients there, which is personal identification, financial credentials, educational credentials, so and employment and work credentials and health credentials. So we have some order how we can do that, because I think right now, we can't just say to someone, go to the GitHub and try to figure out who is on it. So,
yeah.
so the key is more, I think the technology is there. So I think it's there. It's just about organizing the stakeholders, what is available, how we actually orchestrate all of these efforts. And
yes,
we will talk a little bit more about it at Point Zero. But I think the workshop is equally important so that we can actually follow up and people can understand better. I think it's a bit of education on that side. And then how we can have more buy-in to work on these solutions. We're already on the way on ourselves. We are basically, the drums are being, hit every day to make sure that we can actually move forward. But obviously we need help.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Let's shout out to all and everybody that they should support us. Fred, how about you?
Yeah, I think from my side, I always say, why don't you get exposed yourself? So I think what you should start by doing is to go into blockchain and crypto. So you can stake with refugees. VRFGS is the pool called. And this way you're not losing anything, but it's your opportunity. And the UNHCR will basically get a new supporter and they will have more aid in that respect. And while you are on that journey, think about this. Carmen mentioned a number of 300 million people.
Yes.
I've been involved in entrepreneurship and other things for my whole life. If you had a client base of 300 million, which was today not being tackled, isn't that a wonderful problem to look at, right? So I think there is even a very large upside that you can do what you do best today, and you can help a lot of people, and you have like a blue ocean part here of 300 million ever growing. So I think it's really worth also, even though you really think in target operating models and businesses, here is an economic opportunity for you to make the world a better place and still create a fantastic target operating model in supporting the people who really need it.
Frederik, Carmen, thank you so much. There's no better way to conclude it as you just did it, Fred. So I will not spoil that by adding a sentence to this. I'm just looking forward to our discussions and workshop and conversations, and hopefully strong support we will experience during the Point Zero Forum. Thank you so much for making it to today's special edition and episode of the Breaking Banks podcast. We spoke about the issues that come and the challenges that come out of 130 million refugees worldwide in this year, and the numbers are increasing, and it's not kind of, we need to work about it, and we need to think about it and work on it to make that problem somewhat like not controllable, but solvable. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Looking forward to see you all in Zurich, and have a lovely day.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with Fintech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.